just jumping into search in 2013. So I'm sure all of you have heard rankings, and I wouldn't be surprised if most of you got an email last year from somebody upwards asking what rankings, or that their ranking had moved position by 1 or 2 and it's fluctuating, etc. You know, we're still hearing a lot of people talking about ranking positions and being quite focused on 1 or 2 increases. So again, I'm going to come into Hummingbird a little bit later on, but that does kind of change up that we're not going to move away completely from assessing your visibility in search, but not so focused on exact positionings, because it's kind of only part of the story. There's so much more information that we can learn from analytics, and again, I'm going to come on to that one. So last year we're still seeing a lot of sort of traffic fluctuations and ranking discussions. These are a representation of how I still see that the marketing channels throughout 2013 were in play. You have on the left-hand side link building. You know, that's quite, you know, beginning of last year, people were still discussing link building, and we'd see that quite separate, actually, as a separate strategy to on-site SEO, digital advertising and social, which maybe sit a bit closer to one another. And then again, separate to that is traditional PR, email marketing and events. So there is some segregation in regards to these marketing channels. And there was the on-site and the digital advertising integration, which I think we got a lot better at. Again, new clients, as they were coming on board, they're already starting to integrate their PPC campaigns, their digital advertising campaigns, and learning from those to make their SEO on-site campaigns better. You know, PPC is a great way to test things quickly and see how they work, to then obviously influence your SEO strategy. So again, 2013, we're still seeing generally this being the structure. There are some people who are obviously evolving and changing the times, which is good. Teams, so here come the images, sorry. Marketing teams, you may find that you have a marketing department that has somebody from online, somebody from content, somebody from a design aspect, and developers that might communicate, but they still sit very much within their own teams. And to that you might have an external search agency which is starting to integrate with the marketing teams, and maybe an external PR agency that's starting to integrate, but there's still that segregation in terms of integration. And then there's other teams within the business, maybe sales teams or trading teams or events teams, who are creating great content and I think actually aren't aware that the things that they're doing have an impact in search and have an impact in your visibility. And actually, you know, if you were to integrate with one another, there's a lot that can be had. I'm going to come into that in a little bit more detail later as well. But I think in 2013, there's still this kind of segregation. So this was a comment that came across from eConsultancy's Cream event. It's a fantastic event that we attend each year. And this statement I thought was quite good, that the customer doesn't necessarily care about this team structure. They just want a unified experience. And so we can all learn from that, you know, if our customers want us to be integrated and one unique message, then we should reflect that within the business as well. The Hummingbird, you might see this in a couple of presentations throughout the day. Hummingbird obviously was the latter part of last year, and the real change there was conversational and more semantic search, and really leading with content. So this, I heard a really good analogy that explains it quite nicely, that Penguin and Panda were updates to the search algorithm. So imagine your car, maintenance on your car. You might change the windscreen wipers and you might change the wing mirror. You know, those are the Penguin and the Panda. But the Hummingbird is replacing the engine. So it's not changing it completely, but it's changing a core part of it. And with that, I mean, things, and Serena also used this, I think it encapsulates it really well, is looking at more question-focused search results. So actually understand that search engines understand that the way that users are integrating with search engines are to ask it questions to find answers to things. So changing up your content strategy to incorporate, you know, how do I do things, where are things, why would I do things, what are things and when, lots of questions. So this change, obviously we needed to incorporate this into our ongoing search strategy and adapt and evolve with it. Here as well, just to discuss user behaviour. User behaviour is changing, and again, it's been touched by James this morning and Serena earlier. Users are multi-device. They're using different locations to search. They want and expect things to come quicker. As we all know, search speed is a ranking factor. If your website doesn't load as quick as your competitors, if you're identical, then obviously your visibility isn't going to be as great as theirs. They want quick responding websites, and they're in different locations, so we need to adapt and understand user behaviour. So what was the response to Hummingbird and multi-device changes in user behaviour? Well, the response to Hummingbird was all of a sudden there was an outbreak of content. You know, everyone started to write content. We started to see pieces. If I just take that one at the bottom, 5 tips to get your business off the ground. I'm not sure how many articles like that I've seen out there. But I think what we need to consider is how relevant is it? Is it actually interesting content that people want to engage with? Again, touching on what James was saying this morning about actually having great content that, you know, really is interesting. There's a sort of saying is, why care, why share? Why do I care about it? So why would I share it? You know, it needs to be good. It needs to be interesting and engaging, and that will then have more sort of interactions and things like that. I personally believe in the future with search, we might find that a ranking factor would be things about like how many comments has it got, how many shares. Obviously, social signals we're already starting to look at as a search ranking factor, although Google haven't admitted that it's 100% a ranking factor yet. We know that they're going that way, and it's a good indicator on how relevant and interesting a piece of article or content is. And then obviously we've got videos here and infographics and things like that. So we really did have a mass influx of content. In terms of user behaviour, there were lots of discussions around building responsive websites and also looking at your audience and starting to target your audience better. And I think that's been really great from towards the end of 2013 and certainly into 2014. There's lots of discussions about, you know, creating responsive sites and really trying to understand your audience better. So I think that's been a really positive outcome. So this is the important part, I think, is search in 2014. So I know all of these changes have happened, but what do I need to do about it? How can I make my integrated search strategy better? The first one here is measurement planning. Hopefully some of you might have seen this diagram already. There's a little link here at the bottom, so when you do get this presentation, if there's one thing you do from this is go and watch this video. This is a video from Google themselves where they talk about measurement planning. And this really, for me, is so key. It's about just stopping and refining and trying to understand what it is that you're trying to achieve online. So defining your measurement plan. Within the B2C sector, obviously, revenue growth is probably the #1 target for everybody in here. You know, the goal is to increase revenue on the website. Okay, great. That's one. Let's put that aside and let's consider the rest of the website. What are your other objectives? What else are you trying to get your users to do online so you can measure ROI and success and learn from your audience? So then there might be a conversation, that's the only thing I care about. I don't care about anything but revenue. Well then, okay, why have you got a blog then on your site, or why are you asking people to sign up to your newsletter? There are other things that you want your customers to do when they're online. So we need to define that measurement plan and try to understand what are the key factors you want users to do when they're on your site. If it is purely purely to bring in revenue, then maybe you should just create a shop. It's the first thing that users come into. The homepage should be straight into the product. And I'm not saying that's the thing to do, but it's going through that process and trying to understand and define what it is that you can measure to understand success. Then obviously document a technical infrastructure. What's the technicalities behind that? Is it possible? That's integrating with your IT departments and trying to understand is it possible for you to track these certain things? Again, coming back to what James said earlier about the weather, actually adapting analytics to make it work for you. Can it technically be possible, and how can we do it? What APIs can we integrate with? Creating that implementation plan, and then obviously implementing it, and then the key for me here really is maintaining and refining that. I think it's really important to identify and communicate with the different sectors within your business. Over the summer, I went in-house for a client for a period of time, a large retail firm, and basically they had an issue with awareness within the business, and they recognised that there were other people that were making changes online, and that was having an impact on their search strategy, but they weren't. The other departments weren't understanding how and why and what the impact was, what the value was of them understanding it. So as we went in, we recognised that the trading teams actually have a lot of information about brands that are potentially going to be working with them in the future, brands that have decided not to work with them any longer, or it's different seasonalities, and they just take these brand pages offline. And there was no strategy for retaining that and actually showing them that when that happens, that then any visibility that was created for that specific brand is just completely lost in search, and the impact and the value that that has in terms of revenue. And that's okay. It's just about understanding that that's there and that's happening. And raising that awareness with the traders really, I think, was quite insightful for them. And they now have a strategy for when brands go offline. And it's great because we capture and we don't lose any of that. That's 301 redirect strategies and things like that. Also, the product writers, the product content guys, they're constantly writing descriptions about products that are going on the site. It's really important that they understand the impact and some tips and tricks to use. It's not about keyword stuffing, and there's almost, some of them are starting to hear about SEO and then they try to keyword stuff, and that actually can have a negative effect. There needs to be an education piece, so identifying these departments within the business and communicating with them, educating them, has really has seen an incremental growth within the business. Over that sort of 5-6 month period, their revenue increased by 18%, which is quite dramatic. Reviewing the skills gaps. Sometimes I think this might be overlooked. Reviewing the skills gaps within a business. We had a client who had that exact need. They had 280 journalists within the published industry that were creating content for their site, and they weren't really sure at what level these people were. They didn't quite know who understood search and who didn't. So we created this tool which allowed them to review the skills gaps, and it was positioned as a training needs analysis. So the reason when they filled it out was so that we could create a training plan for them that was going to help them to grow, especially in the journalist area, newspapers and potentially going more online than offline. Some of them are quite fearful for their jobs. So it was, we had to tread really carefully and make sure that this was an educational thing. But then the business could really clearly see the profile of the organisation and potentially where there were any gaps, so that we really clearly knew where there may be any weaknesses that we can then go in there and train them, give them help and support to make their overall search strategy stronger. So what can you do now? The first thing I would suggest to go away from today is to define your audience segments. Those of you who are already in the analytics or done the measurement plans, etc., you've probably already got this, you've got an idea of who your audience are, but what are those audiences and what are the segments? then discussing obviously your objectives. So what does success look like for you, and not just having revenue as the key target. You know, there's other metrics now with analytics being so advanced. There's a lot you can do with it. Custom segments really has opened up a whole new opportunity. Then obviously identifying key departments within the business. Who are the teams that you can that are influencing online, and who can you actually integrate with, and who's there to open those doors for you? And then understanding the skills gaps within your business. Once you've understood where your skills gaps are, you've got an opportunity to train people, and an opportunity where they actually learn something from it as well. And then you might have also, on a positive flip from the skills gaps, is you might have people within the business that have got more skills in digital than you'd actually realised, and you can actually use those people as well. And then the most important thing is communicating your vision. So making sure that you are communicating with people on a regular basis so that they can see the outcomes and the results.